Hi, this is Joseph Williams, son of John Williams, and you are watching the Nerfherder Council.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Nerfherder Council. I am your host, JT. We are live on Facebook and YouTube, not only our own, but those of the Virtual Cantina Network. Real quick, guys, as a quick reminder, the views of the Nerfherder Council do not necessarily reflect those of the Virtual Cantina Network, and there may be some bad language on our show, so if you're not into that sort of thing, you may want to turn it off. As always, guys, we are brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/NHC for your 30-day trial and a free audiobook download. If you would like to get customizable Nerfherder Council swag, just go to shop.nerfherdercouncil.com. And if you would like to get some awesome Virtual Cantina Network swag, just go to tpublic.com/user/virtual-cantina. And guys, if you are watching on either our YouTube channel or that of the Virtual Cantina Network, please click the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notification bell so that you are notified every time we go live. Without further ado, let me bring on my co-host and my best friend, my brother AJ. How's it going, man?
Hey, man, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It's I mean, as good as you can.
Yeah, sorry, we usually come on hot and fun, but this isn't the topic for it, so I wasn't really sure how to say hello tonight.
I know. Yeah, it was hard writing up the show descriptions because I was kind of the same way. I was like, well, how do you intro this sort of thing and how do you talk about it? But yeah, I mean, right off the rip, let's just, before we get to our special guest host here, for those of you guys who haven't been fans of the show very long, we have been doing the show since December of 2015. So this will be it's our 10th year doing this. And to my knowledge, we've never done a serious episode, quote unquote. So this is a first for us, but we kind of decided, it's a very solemn day. I myself I hate to call myself a historian for this stuff, but I have read a lot of books and watched a lot of documentaries, and we have some personal stories about it. And so, it's something that's, always a day that it's a day of remembrance, and I make sure to always, I watch the ceremony from the Freedom Tower, so I had that on my earbuds while I was working this morning. So yeah, it's an important day, and I think, I think it's important to remember. And so AJ and I kind of wanted to just, have a discussion about it for a change and kind of swerve off of our normal goofiness and just be serious and kind of show the day the respect that it deserves, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's 23 years on from the events, and I don't know how your social feeds were today. Maybe I'm not following the right stuff, but everything that was being thrown at me was almost nothing having to do with 9/11 whatsoever. Like, it's just another day now. It's amazing how fast people move on from these sorts of things.
Yeah. And that's something I definitely want to get into, because I think I have a lot of thoughts about that, and I don't know that it's necessarily people's fault per se. I didn't see a lot of, remember stuff today, but I saw a lot yesterday of, all the people, going to bed and not, waking up, and it's their last day type of thing, that whole post. So Kale McLeish, good to see you, man. Kale says, that said, if the views of the Virtual Cantina Network don't meet up with terrorists suck, there are much worse problems than a bit of bad language. It's funny. Percy Engine Productions 061 says, hi, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
Chastity has a story that she is posting here in pieces, and then we'll get to our special guest co-host, who actually has a very, very personal connection to it, to 9/11. Chastity says, I was 11 when 9/11 happened. I remember it very clearly because we had to write about our experiences about it in middle school as a school project. My English teacher made us write a different one too a couple years later. I still have my report somewhere. I went to school that morning like normal, and my neighbor kid ran up to me and said some planes crashed into a building. He was obsessed with the military and Army planes specifically, so I responded with, and they were what kind of planes? So
do you have the rest there?
I do not.
He said he got mad and told me that a normal airplane took over and they crashed it into a big building in New York. The bell rang. This is on Facebook, by the way. There's a character limit to what we can see on StreamYard, so
Okay.
can't put it on screen, unfortunately. But the bell rang and we went to class where the teachers kept trying to keep us calm and distracted, but it wasn't working. The school was on lockdown. All we knew was that some planes had been hijacked and that all planes were being grounded. My classroom was in the portable, and it was my day to take the roll to the office. I had to walk all the way around the outside of the school. A plane flew over the school as I was getting to the front of the school, and I screamed and started running inside. I turned in the roll if I could go back to my class through the halls and not outside. I had to be escorted through the halls. After school, my mom was home. She normally worked until 7. She was sitting frozen in front of the TV, watching the news as they replayed the crashes. My older brother came home from school and was just sobbing. My mom just kept saying it reminded her of Kennedy being assassinated, how frozen the world seemed.
Yeah, I think, the gravity of it and the situation itself, I think, having not obviously, you nor I have lived through Kennedy, even though we actually have an extremely personal connection to that day. Our grandmother, our grandmother died that day of brain cancer a couple hours before Kennedy was shot. Yeah, I would have to think, the effect on the country was, fairly similar. So, Mark Truax tuning in. Good to see you, man. I haven't seen you in a while. It says, I was a firefighter in New York on 9/11. Good Lord. Should have you on too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a story I'd like to hear.
Yeah. So speaking of having somebody on, let's just, bring him on. You know him, you love him. He is one of our very, very best friends here on the show. He is responsible for this lunacy being on the Virtual Cantina Network. He is, of course, Spencer Jowitz. What's up, man?
Guys, thank you so much for having me on tonight's episode. I know it's not the usual shenanigans, first and foremost, that we show on the Virtual Cantina Network or the general, lack of a better word, bullshit that you get from the Virtual Cantina Network or from the Nerfherder Council. But it was very important to have this episode and also tell some of my story about 9/11 around what that happened. But thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's an honor always to be on your show, but it's it's an honor to be on this episode in particular.
No, appreciate it, man. You're always welcome here, and it's appropriate, because as you said, you were there. I mean, you like Mark have experience with it, from. I mean, why don't we start there? Why don't you give your story about that day?
So that day, I was living at my parents' house, and I was going to grad school at Long Island University CW Post out on Long Island. And my parents' house is in Great Neck, New York, which is overlooking the Long Island Sound. If you are a fan of literature, it's East Egg from The Great Gatsby. So Great Neck is East Egg, and West Egg is Port Washington, which is the next town over on the Sound. So you have a direct view from the water in Great Neck to the White Stone Bridge. So I remember it was a day off from school, and I had the TV on in my bedroom, and I remember seeing something. My eyes are half open. I keep it, shut, whatever. My mother knocks on my door and runs into my room and said, a plane just hit the tower. Look in our backyard. You could see the smoke over the trees.
Wow.
So not only were I able to, see the smoke from there and start freaking out about that, but the only thing I could particularly think of at that time as well, because I was a TA in the theater department at my school, was my students. And so my parents, I quickly threw some clothes on, I was about to leave. My parents were like, where are you going? As I'm driving to campus. Why are you driving to campus? I'm like, because I'm worried about the mentality of my students right now, quite honestly. More so than myself, I'm worried about them. How are they right now? I got to campus and made sure that, everybody was situated, made sure that, all the classes in the department were canceled for the rest of the day, made sure that I was around. But you could not get a phone call. Lines were tied up all around New York. You were just not able. It was just hectic, and there was a lockdown campus as soon as I got there. So not only was I stuck there on campus, but I couldn't even call my parents to let them know I was okay on there. I had to get libraries open, so I was able to send an AOL instant message to my mom to let her know I'm
Wow.
okay. Yeah. And obviously people are putting posts on my in my AOL or my MySpace saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on?" It was just, I was, like I said, I was like literally like miles away. Dear friends of mine from high school were firefighters and killed in the tragedy. My future wife's cousin was killed there. One of my dearest friends was working in the stock exchange and would tell me stories about how they got them out of the stock exchange, doing a human train to get outside because you couldn't see because of all the debris. It was just horrific. But the one thing I said is that the country would become stronger and more united as ever in the days to follow. And that was the one thing I did tell my students. And I was right in that scenario, is that I've never seen the country, regardless of your political affiliation, everything going on in the country and the world, I had never seen the United States as strong and as well as united as it was when we were faced with tragedy. Everybody was looking out for each other, and it's horrific. Next closest thing to that is my wife was at the Boston Marathon bombing.
Oh,
And
geez, wow.
I was on the other side of the state. I was in Springfield when I got the text saying a bomb just went off at the marathon, and she was at the finish line. So in my backyard, literally, the last two major on our soil tragedies have happened in my backyard, which has been horrible. But yeah, I mean, that's my story about 9/11. I mean, like I said, I was basically, like I said, I could see the smoke from my parents' house. It was that horrific. You were talking about earlier is, people are kind of moved on. People don't forget. People always, I think, remember, but people also are dealing with it in their own ways, per se. It's not like, I mean, how many people see ads for D-Day? I'm, just throwing that out there. I'm just saying that, all these different,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we deal with tragedy in our own ways, and we remember it in our own ways. And as long as we're remembering in our own ways, then that's the most important thing, to have, because this is like you said, this was the first real major on American soil catastrophe that we had in our generation. We're not talking about our parents' generation, which was obviously Kennedy, like you were talking about earlier. But this was our generation. This was like, some of us were, in grad school and college and high school. One of your members said that they were 11 years old when that is, and well, I'm just gonna say, get off my lawn, because I'm the crappy old man.
Right.
I gotta make the laugh. But still, I mean, it's affected all of our lives, and to this day, if you want to think about it, every time we're traveling to Star Wars Celebration, we're remembering 9/11, because security was not what it was like back then as it is now.
Yeah, very true.
It's really mind blowing. Yeah.
It all started then. It all started then. Literally, it all started then. Taking off the shoes, the whole empty your pockets, take your belt off. That's all come from travel in 9/11. And one of the planes came from Boston. It came from Logan, like where I am, which is crazy in itself. There was that show, A Million Little Things. Fantastic show. I don't know if you saw it. It ended like about a year ago. And the lead character from Office Space is in it as well. And he was supposed to be on the plane that was hijacked from Logan. Like they actually they're now incorporating that into storylines, in media.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, it's prolific for the Gen Xers tragedy of our lifetime up until obviously the Boston Marathon. But this affected us more as a country than the Boston Marathon did.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
We've got people that are now of drinking age that weren't alive when this happened. Like it was so bizarre. I've dated people who have children born in 2005 and later. And, if the same way that we heard about Kennedy's assassination or Pearl Harbor, they only know the stories. They don't know the personal impact because they haven't lived through it. But there is something super powerful. Spencer, have you been back to the 9/11 memorial since they put that up?
I have been not really walked around, but I walked around it, but I haven't walked through it. But it was interesting because a couple of months ago, I was clearing out. I don't know how I found my old MySpace account. I don't know why it's still up there. But
I would love to find mine. That's where I met my wife.
I found a picture of my grandfather with my cousin and I. I must have been about 11 years old, up on the top floor of the World Trade Center of Tower 1.
Oh, jeez.
And I posted it because obviously I was also trying to remember my grandfather. But that was the only time I ever went to the towers at all. Like you live in New York, you very rarely go to any of the the tourist traps. I've never been.
Stuff, yeah.
I've never been to Statue of Liberty, and I grew up in New York. A lot of people in Boston don't really go into the city and go do stuff. The people in Chicago who've never been to Wrigley Field. It's like it's there. So why? That's the mentality. I can go anytime.
Yeah. Floridians don't go to Disney and so on. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, I found a picture of my grandfather. There was one time I did something. He took my cousin and I. We were reminiscing about that. I had not been since, but like I said, I walked around it one time at night. I didn't want to walk through it, that evening. I was out for the evening. I was, probably a little intoxicated.
I was going to say Spencer was drinking is what you're saying.
Right.
Well, here's what you'll appreciate is that once I got off campus in grad school and I finally let us off there, the first thing I did was I ran to a karaoke bar. So I did karaoke the night of 9/11.
Wow.
That drunk. I actually sang a Bridge Over Troubled Water, which, that's not the most uplifting song, but that was the only one I could think of to put down.
All right.
But yeah, no, like I said, I've had family friends, people I went to high school with, and my wife's cousin. Their names are all up on the wall over there. It's amazing how that shaped our country, literally our country. Because up until, like you said, Kennedy, when have we had a legitimate terrorist attack on our own soil?
Yeah. And I think, talking about like the remembrance of it, I think that's the thing is that's one thing that I've learned is, when we talk about Kennedy, and I saw someone also make the Pearl Harbor reference this afternoon as well. And I've realized that, having lived through 9/11, you can read about it and you can hear stories about it, but unless you lived it, there is a certain it's different in a way that you just can't explain. And I think the one thing that makes 9/11 unique. And I want to get to some comments here in the chat here in a minute because we got people tuning in. I'd like to have them be able to tell their stories too. But I think the thing that's unique about 9/11 is that it's, to me, Pearl Harbor, like you can go down, to Hawaii, and you can go to the memorial at the Arizona and stuff, and it's underwater and all this kind of stuff. New York City, where the towers were, where the Freedom Tower is now, I mean, Spencer, you can speak to this because you were down there. I mean, you lived in New York, like you said, but the thing that struck me, AJ and I were there in March of 2003, so it was cleaned up, but it was literally just a construction site, 2 giant square holes in the ground. But the thing that struck me as just unbelievable was when you hear the numbers of people that perished, and you talk about the buildings collapsing, and you see the footage, or it seems like this big, like there was a lot of room for this stuff to fall. But when you're down there, the first thing I noticed was that across the street from the towers is a building that's, I believe, like 65 stories tall. And I looked at that building, and it just kept going up and up. And then I thought, the towers were each, almost 50% taller than that. And there were 2 of them. And when you think about that amount, that the size of that, the sheer size, and it coming down, there is nowhere for it to go. And when you really realize what a massive event that was in such a small space, you can actually get a feel for, what were those people doing that were in the footprint of the building? How the hell did they, did anybody survive that was, able to run and all that kind of stuff? And I mean, it's extremely poignant to me because of that. Like, you can actually, it's a little more tangible. Something like World War II, you can go to the memorials and all that stuff, you see all that stuff, but it's so large that you just don't know. You can't really get a solid grasp on it. The Kennedy assassination, it was the president, and we've never been through something like that. We've had, presidents have been shot at. We had the whole Reagan thing when we were little kids. I mean, hell, even most recently, I mean, I think people really discredit how important of an event that could have been. When Donald Trump got shot at. Those sorts of things don't happen, but it's one person. It's not this huge thing, in a small space that affects so many people at once. And as you said, Spencer, like it affected the country, but it also changed it. And it sounds like such a hyperbolic thing to say, but it really isn't. And for those of us who were there, like you said, like in college and all that, like, I was 25, AJ was 22. So we were obviously very aware of what was happening. And, travel now is different. You do think about it when you go through the airport and stuff. And, it's just an incredible thing to have lived through. And I really wish there was more attention given to it. I'm one of those that believes that today should be a national holiday. Personally, I've always believed that. So I'm in that camp, but I can understand a little bit people younger than us that, Kale said he was 3 when it happened and stuff. And, my stepson was, what was he at that point? A couple months old. My stepdaughter was 6. Of course it's not going to hit them the same because, they don't understand what they're going through. But, for us,
I think where this one is different is that being in the modern era, and by design, it was covered by the media in real time. You had radio reports of Pearl Harbor and then newspapers the next day. The way this was orchestrated was deliberately. We've got comments here in the chat about, and we all have that same thing where we hear something like, oh, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And my first thought was some pilot screwed up horribly. Yeah. Like, I did not think terror attack. I thought some pilot just, and also it just said a plane. It didn't say, a super jet, a Boeing 747, whatever it was. I forget what the plane type was. A commercial jetliner smacked the building. I thought it was, a Cessna or some little like single.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, AJ and I worked at the same place, Spencer, and and people started like, we were both call center type people, and people started circulating the news, and all they said is that the news said a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was like, what kind of a nitwit in a little single engine plane hits the World Trade Center? And then 20 minutes later they said, another plane hit. I was like, man, what are the odds? I will never forget saying, what are the odds of two little those PP planes hitting the World Trade Center the same day? And someone goes, no, they were jumbo jets. And that's when I went, oh shit.
Yeah, that was the, sorry to say, but that was the brilliance of the attack. Was it was designed in two phases so that all the media attention would have cameras on the buildings when the second one hit. I mean, because of that, we've got footage and coverage in real time, and people's stories and cell phone footage from the ground. So even people that weren't alive, and even people that weren't there in New York, can experience it in such a more visceral, like relatable way than any other attack that we've ever had.
Yep. So if you think about this, if you think about the media, let's talk a little bit about the media and how it is now, which is honestly, it's great that we got this information in live time. But let's talk about another American tragedy that's happening in our lifetime. Let's talk about the Challenger disaster. I remember my teachers rolling in the TVs. Now, if you're a child of the 80s, when a TV got rolled in, you're usually pretty happy about that. Not this particular juncture. We saw that happen after the fact because they were like, it was on repeat on the news. But that was a thing that was, the shuttle launches were always televised, especially with Christopher McCullough being the first teacher to go up there. The terrorists knew that we would be watching in live time. At that time, from the Challenger disaster on, we were, and since if you want to see even the Kennedy disaster, tragedy, but we are known for being a heavily televised pomp and circumstance. We're going to put our balls out for the whole world to see on TV, live and living color. I mean, if you want, that's just the way society was. So it was not difficult. We had movies back, before then. You look at movies like, The Running Man, which, had it was a game show with death on it that was on national television. That was our society. It was all voyeuristic intentions at every single time. They were not stupid about what their intentions were. It's to see what's happening in live time and put real fear. But what I don't think that they realized is twofold. One is that you are not going to you might knock the towers down, but you are not going to knock down the spirits of the United States of America. We came back bigger, badder, and stronger than ever. I knew that. At the Boston Marathon, and the bomber hid in a boat, and I said, you're messing with Boston, okay? Like, you're messing with Boston. This guy will be found in 5 minutes, and he was.
Right.
I mean, come on. But the thing is that unfortunately, like I said, we're a voyeuristic society. Everything happens in live time. It doesn't matter what it is. We have court TV, Yep. You see things that are happening on television. You never would have thought about that. There's that one episode that I hate talking about from Black Mirror on TV to prove a point. I don't want to talk about what happened in it because it ruined the whole show for me. I never watched another episode from the first episode ever of Black Mirror. If you saw that episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And everyone's like, oh, you gotta watch it afterwards. No, I will never watch another episode of that show because that messed me up. But it's just the way society is. And unfortunately, for better or worse, that's what they were trying to do.
Yep. Yeah. Well, let's get to some comments here. Like I said, I want to make sure that everybody's got, gets their stories in, because this is not just our show tonight. Miranda Helmick, always good to see you. Always good to see you. She says, my instructor this week at my training was talking about how weird it was flying right after. He said O'Hare Airport was empty and there were no female flight attendants. He said all the flight attendants were linebacker-looking guys and how everyone just sat down and was quiet. To this day, I can't comprehend how the events of that day happened. Kale McLeish says, I'm someone that didn't really hit. Mom and dad told me they turned on the news when the first plane hit, thinking, what a terrible accident. And then seeing the second one hit live. That's, like I said earlier, he said he was 3 at the time. He said, too young to understand what any of it was about at the time. Now I'm older. I understand what I lived through, but still not to the extent of it all because I wasn't really there at the time. Yeah. And like to our point, Kale, like, if you're not living it, it's just a different experience that you can't really put into words. Miranda says, yeah, I watched the second plane hit live too. I thought the first plane was a terrible accident too. Yeah, that was the weirdest thing. I was like, it was just surreal.
Well, when we hit the Pentagon, we're like, bullshit.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Literally. Like, oh, that just happened. Like,
yeah, that reminds me, I got to bring up my my Facebook page. Our uncle has a story about that because he was actually in the intelligence community when this all went down. But Percy Engine Productions 061 says, Mom told me that when 9/11 happened, Dad came into the bedroom and said, New York's under attack. And she thought he was being stupid till she came out and saw what was happening. Chastity Crawley, she says, my grandma compared 9/11 to Pearl Harbor. She was in Hawaii during Pearl Harbor. My grandparents were engaged, so she should have been where it happened, but she had gone to town for something. Yeah, that's like, we still got a couple more comments I'd like to get to, but I mean, Spencer, AJ, and I were told a story when we were there in March of 2003, and we were talking to one of the police officers working the corner there, and he said that had been his corner for years. Well, he and his wife got married like late August or early September, something like that, of 2001. And he said she worked on, I believe, the 100th floor, 101st floor. One of the very top floors is where she worked in one of the towers. And he said they were supposed to come back. Hopefully I don't get all emotional because this always gets me. They were supposed to come back from their honeymoon on September 10th and go back to work the morning of the 11th. And he said, if we would have done that, we'd both be dead because she'd have been in the tower and I'd have been running in there to save people. But they decided that they were having such a good time on their honeymoon that they decided to stay an extra day. So the day that they decided to stay extra was 9/11. So they didn't come back and go to work. And that's like just the coincidences of things like that happening are just unbelievable. Kale says, I honestly hope people don't live through something in the scale again anytime soon. I don't want to see anything else like this in my lifetime. Amen to that, Kale. Amen to that. Yeah, this is like,
yeah, that's hatred on another level for honestly no reason.
I mean, if you remember,
it's an attack on a way of life, and very few people that suffered as a result of that day had anything to do with what the attackers were so mad at.
I mean, if you remember that one scene from bring it back to Star Wars, from the Book of Boba Fett, when Cobb Vanth is sitting in the cantina in Mos Espa, and they see the Death Star 2 being blown up in live time on that in the holodeck. That was similar to what we were experiencing, if you want to bring it back to Star Wars, because they were watching it in live time. People remember where they were when things happened. People, we remember, our parents remember where they were when the Kennedy assassination was. We remember where we were the Challenger disaster. We remember where we were for 9/11. We remember where we were when Princess Diana died. Like we've had some major tragedies in the last 60, 70 years in the world, and it's all been in live time. And it's scary that we have the capacity to actually watch all of this, and the footage is there of everything that happened. Just imagine what's not been shown.
Yeah.
With all the cameras and coverage that everything has now, everyone's got everything they need in their pocket to document something. I don't think there's going to be another tragedy that doesn't have massive coverage on it, because everyone's on camera all the time, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up our uncle's comment, but yeah, he was. Yeah, so he had a meeting at the Pentagon. He says, I was on 66 on the way to the Vienna metro stop for a meeting at the Pentagon. Needless to say, meeting canceled as the world changed. that's, I mean, that's just unbelievable. It's, the amount of close calls. And I mean, and I think that's the thing about it is, not only was it broadcast live as you guys are talking about, um, so it was, all of us saw this in real time, but I think because of that, and because of the fact that they do keep it alive, which I think the ceremony they do is exceptional, where they have all the names read every year. I think it retains a certain level of intimacy, I would say, because it seems like a more personal thing. And I know when AJ and I were there, they had a wall erected all down one side, and it was a plywood wall, and people had just posted pictures of loved ones and messages, and even still some people saying, hey, if you know anything, they just couldn't grasp the fact that they were gone. And the one that always gets me, of course, me being me, there was a dog, a rescue dog that, that was a rough one. And, they said he was a good boy and stuff. And the most unbelievable one for me, which really sucked. And I think that, and to me, it's always spoken the most about the AJ, like you just said, like the innocent people that were killed. There was a mom who posted a picture of her child. It couldn't have been more than like a few years old, and the she had wrote on the picture, it said all he did was go to school that day. And that will forever stick with me, because I mean, that basically says it all. And there were so many of those types of sentiments on that wall. And one of the things that I am the most proud of is, so I think that wall and everything that was on there is somewhere. And we were in New York City because my band was showcasing for 15 major record companies those few days. And so we said we want to go pay our respects. And well, AJ had made custom T-shirts for our band that were like New York City themed in the logo and whatnot. And we had probably about 20 or 30 fans drive from Cleveland, Ohio, all 8 hours to come support us at these shows. So there's probably a crew of like 30 to 40 of us that did this trip together, and all of us signed one of the T-shirts, and it got stapled up to that wall. So it was kind of a really cool way to pay respects to that, and kind of put a little bit of our hearts into what people were feeling. So yeah, but that wall and that picture, that little boy, and and again the picture of the dog, because it is me. There's so many stories like that. And again, when you listen to and watch the ceremony, like that they have every year, and they have family members say a little speech, and you can tell that it's still fresh for them, and it's painful. And even more so, like we're talking about, it's 23 years. The amount of people that weren't, I mean, there were some young kids using this term, but there were some not so young kids that said, oh, my grandfather so and so. It's like, oh my God, are we really that far down the road from this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you guys are able to explain this. So this is a question. I mean, it's probably just theoretical, but I've never been able to properly explain why 9/11 hits me as hard as it does. I've never been able to properly put into words like why it upsets me, why I have such reverence for the day. I can't figure it out. It's weird. So I don't know if you guys have theories as to why someone would feel that way, but that wasn't directly affected by it. But I've never been able to put my finger on it, but it is just the most solemn day in my life that I'm aware of.
We lived through a major American tragedy that happened on our soil. And if it did not affect you, I don't know how it did. The only people it didn't affect were the innocent ones, the kids that went to school that day, had no idea what was going on until like their parents later on told them, or whatever their nature. But we were all the age where, whether we were miles away or hundreds of miles away, or thousands of miles away. This was the first real American tragedy of a terrorist nature on our soil. We're not talking about an embassy blowing up in London, from anything, or the American embassy blowing up there, or any other country. We're talking about a national monument, recognized building, people dying on our soil. So, of course, it's going to have some reference with us because it was tangible for us. We were able to touch that building, whether it been in, before it went up there. We all have people within the 6 degrees of our lives of somebody who passed at the towers or has a story of the towers. So if it doesn't affect you, I'd be shocked because it's in our face more so than anything else. We could talk about Pearl Harbor, how we all have a connection maybe towards there, understandable within a 6 degree, but our generation, Gen X, was 9/11. That was a big one that shaped society after a tragedy.
Yeah. And to see, to your point, New York is kind of, it's the symbol of America to the world. It's in so many movies and pop culture and everything. Even people that haven't been there feel like they know the place.
Right.
So to see it happening there, it's one thing to see, like, the subway bombing in France or something, or Spain, all these places that we know as Americans are foreign to us. Unless we've physically been there, we don't have the connection. But when you see your home turf, so to speak, under attack like that, it's so much more affecting because it feels, it's to your point, Spencer, it felt more real than the other things that we've heard about that happen in other places. It's very easy to hear a news report about some place you've never been and people you've never met and be somewhat removed from it. But when that you might have actually spoken to somebody who was in the tower and never knew it, prior to 9/11, and to see it like that, it hits right at the heart of our own culture in such a way that's so much more personal. And seeing those ground level account of, the camera pans up and you see the dust cloud coming at the camera. It's unlike anything that's ever been experienced before. Even your point about the Challenger, we saw a little blip up in the sky go poof, but that was it. It's just so different when you see people physically running for their lives and maybe not even making it out safely in real time like that.
And I'd be remiss not to say is that every year on this date, we see all the posts about actor Steve Buscemi re-enlisting into the fire department to volunteer to help. Every year on this date, we see about Steve Buscemi. And I have a great deal of respect for those who are not active firefighters or, Brothers of the Shield, if you will, getting involved. I mean, Mark Truex, a good friend of all of ours from, the VCN, saying that he was a firefighter in New York at that time as well. We all know people's stories. We know we're connected. And it's a story that we are going to tell, our kids, our grandkids, and hopefully the day that the country changed. And, I don't want to say that some skeptics might have saw this happening because, the country was very much high on the hog back in that day. If you imagine that something was going to happen sooner or later, we didn't know what, but just the morale, but it did nothing but make us stronger. What was made to make us weaker made us stronger. Every scenario that has happened since then, tragedies on our shores, has been nothing but an opportunity to show the true nature of our country, our hearts, and our integrity as people. And it's very disconcerting. And we're not going to get into a political debate or anything of that nature that's going on, because we do not do that here on the Virtual Cantina Network. And there's no politics in Star Wars, so we're not going to talk about politics in Star Wars, because there's no such thing as politics in Star Wars. But it was the one thing that didn't matter if you were Republican or if you were a Democrat or if you were a Green Party or if you were an independent. It didn't matter. You were an American, and you were as proud to be an American as your brother who might have voted, and your neighbor who lives next door. Every 4 years you get a huge argument with. You wanted to do nothing but hug that person and say, I love you.
Yeah.
That,
I got a couple more comments I want to bring up, but real quick, to your point, Spencer, I know that, my band played a big benefit show for the firefighters in New York here in Cleveland shortly after that happened. And it was at a club that held 1,000 people. We sold it out. And I will never, ever forget being on that stage. And of course, you got to say a few words of thanks. Just say, hey, man, thanks, everybody, because people were donating money. The bands all obviously donated their time. And it's so, I guess it's cliche at a point, because we all heard all the chants of USA, USA. We have heard them at sporting events and all this different stuff. But when that happened at that concert, it was, first of all, it was thunderous. And second of all, you knew it was heartfelt. And you did feel, I mean, excuse me, I think you just phrased it perfectly, Spencer. You did feel that camaraderie, and you did feel that sense of togetherness.
Mhm.
And it was, and it was an awesome feeling. And it sucked that it had to take something like that for that to occur, but it did occur. And it gave me hope. It still gives me hope, to be honest with you, because I know that deep down somewhere, like you said, like, no politics and everything, and we don't talk politics either, but deep down somewhere, no matter the division people might feel, it's really not, I think people, when the chips are down, really come together, I think. So yeah. Chastity says that in her hometown, I know she lives out in Utah, in her hometown, the city puts up a flag for everyone that was killed on 9/11. It stays up for most of September each year, but on 9/11, they light each flag as they read the name that flag represents. Good Lord. Wow.
It's incredible.
Yeah. John Phillips, good to see you, man. He says, to your point, Spencer, we all saw it on TV. We didn't see Oklahoma bombing or the original Trade Center bombing when it happened, only afterwards. And then Miranda, this is something I wanted to get to, so I'm glad you bring it up. Being a first responder myself, and thank you for that always. Being a first responder myself, I always think about what first responders went through then and after. I don't know how some of those people mentally recovered. Psychologically, we shouldn't have to rationalize such an unrational event. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because I did a brief little guest spot on a show here in Cleveland earlier today, the Seth Williams show, and we talked about it, and we talked about the word heroes. And I think, one thing that was brought up was, Flight 93. I think, I think that doesn't get talked about as much as it should. We are focused on, the trade center because of, the size of the building and the amount of loss of life. But, the Pentagon, got hit, obviously, as we know. But Flight 93, you had a bunch of people who pretty much knew what their fate was and decided to do something anyway. And I think that is something that should always be talked about, because, taking down that airplane, or at least trying to take it over, knowing what they knew, that, 3 planes had already hit national landmarks, and, they basically surmised, like, they're probably going to the White House or going to Washington with this one. I mean, I can't imagine the fortitude that it had to have taken to decide we're going to do something about this, and especially I tip of the spear, the first guy going down that aisle, like he knows what is probably in store for him, and it's just unbelievable to me. And I think it is a perfect example of what we believe in ourselves to be as Americans, and also what the I'm not sure how to phrase this properly, but it's when we think about 9/11 and we think of the first responders and the people that quote unquote that did something about this, I think they should be the first ones, some of the first ones we think of. And I don't think they are, but I think that is such a display of courage. Um, you know, because even the people in New York City, some of them, they weren't aware the building was coming down. They were just like, let's get the hell out of here, or let's go help people get the hell out of here. It wasn't in their minds, hey, this thing's going to collapse. But the people on Flight 93 absolutely knew what, where they were going, where this was going to end for them, and they still did it. And I mean, Miranda says it perfectly. She says those are regular people being heroes. Yeah. And I just think that is such an unbelievable part of the story. And I mean, could you imagine if they had gotten all the way to Washington, what that would have looked like to see like the Capitol or the White House as just like a smoking hole in the ground? What a visual that would have been. I hate to phrase it in these terms, but hopefully you know where I'm coming from. What a quote unquote win that would have been for the terrorists.
It'd be almost like if, for example, if you were to take, England, for example, if, we watch, V for Vendetta, over here in the United States, with the whole Guy Fawkes Day over in England, talking about blowing up Parliament in Big Ben, which is, a symbol over in England, you have something that stands for, and it's like the symbol of that country, then anything of that time or in that country would have been, the fact that they got the towers, they didn't get they were going towards, DC. If they got the White House, it would have been bad. I think it would have been worse if I'd not to say that it was not a horrific act of terrorism and, a complete tragedy. But like you said, if something happened to the White House, I hate to imagine what life would be today, honestly. I mean,
yeah.
Whoever had the football at that time, if they were still alive, probably would have pressed the button.
Yeah.
Yeah, they the people on Flight 93 really, the heroism doesn't just stop at taking the plane down. Because of that target, they had already hit at the population of America and put the fear into all of us. Because normally when we hear about tragedies and massive loss of life, it's military. It's not regular people being attacked, not here. So they had already put the fear in us because we knew that we were in the crosshairs. But to strike, to your point, at a symbol of our government, of Western civilization and democracy as we know it, that would have had shockwaves all around the world in an entirely different degree. Because we've already seen terrorist attacks before and heard of them, and life goes on, unfortunately, in a dismissive way. But to see the seat of government of the most powerful nation in the world attacked like that would have been so much more terrifying to everybody on the planet. Because at that point, if the White House can get hit like that, then no place is safe.
Yeah.
So those people on Flight 93 were heroes in so much more than just the loss of life that they endured and prevented by their actions. It's also the culture that they preserved.
Yep. Nick Hall says, I was in 4th grade and we were rounded up into class groups by grade. It was explained to us what terrorism was. Heavy subject matter process at such a young age. Good buddy Jim Bartek, Jackal One, he says, I had just retired from the military a couple months earlier and was waiting for the call to return if needed. Damn. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, even though it's been said a million times, it can never be said enough. Just, I mean, the first responders. I mean, I've seen so many documentaries and there's so much footage, and just those people going up. And I think what gets missed sometimes is, of course you could say, well, that's their job. You could dumb it down to that. But you know what? I think they knew there was no way in hell that they were getting that fire put out up there. And yet they were still headed up there to do something. It was very much a hopeless situation. And they just kept doing what they had to do. And I know that that's their job. And we you want to say, well, that's, what they signed up for and everything like that. So it's, that for them, that's normal. To them, they think, oh, that's normal. But it's not. I mean, that will always just be unbelievable to me. And it's just a testament to the human spirit. It's a testament to the selflessness, that those people have. So again, Miranda, thank you. One of the most heartbreaking things that I've seen in all of the, documentaries and videos and stuff that I've come across was, firefighters. I don't remember if it's police as well, but I know at least firefighters, they have like little locator things that they wear, and they tweet, to, hey, if they're lost somewhere, the tweet people can kind of locate them or whatever. At least back, I don't know if it's changed now, but back then that's what they had. And there was one of the documentaries, I think it was the National Geographic one, they were showing the morning after, and at ground zero, it sounded like a flock of birds. You just heard hundreds of these things, if not thousands, going off all at the same time. And you basically knew what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such an incredible thing to see. And like I say, it's just, I wish I could put into words why it affects me the way that it does. It honestly confuses me, because it just, I feel so emotional about it. And full disclosure, AJ, you know this, I'm one of those people who's like, I hate people. I love pets. Like I'm a dog person. Like, I think people could be a-holes and dogs can't. I'm one of those. So maybe this is just such an incredible loss of life and such a human tragedy that it even cuts through someone who's a little jaded like me. I wonder sometimes if that's what it is.
Honestly, I'm the same way. You're more emotional than I am, but I was in New York over the summer, and I made I call it a pilgrimage to see the 9/11 memorial and museum, and just walking up to the site, and I was there with you in 2003, so I have a sense of scale to this thing, but what an incredible mix of emotions it was to be back there again. One, to see how beautiful the area is now.
Yeah.
To your point, Freedom Tower is not on the very site. It is slightly away from the site.
Yeah.
And the memorial itself is underground. They've left the footprint of the two towers there, and they are waterfalls that cascade inward. And they have all around the perimeter the names of all the victims that day. And then you go and take stairs down into the underground section, like where the subways run and stuff like that. And that's where the memorial is. The sheer scale of it, one, you have to see it in person to believe it. No amount of footage is going to do it justice. And I told you that one thing they did very well was, yes, there are all kinds of tributes all over the place, and the original footprints and the substructure of the buildings are intact there. So you can actually go up and see them, and actually, in some cases, put your hand on it and touch the actual remaining structure. But then inside, where the actual buildings would have been, they have the true memorial where there's no cameras allowed, there's no recording of any kind, and it takes you through, much like when we went to that Titanic exhibit down in Columbus at COSI, where they give you like a time lapse kind of thing, whereas you're walking through the events proceed. And it's incredible because as we have all lived through this, we know what we felt as it was unfolding in our thoughts and feelings throughout the day. I didn't want to go in there. Just even like seeing the intro bits of it, I wanted to turn around, and they have exits throughout the whole thing because it's overwhelming. But I felt like I had to, like it would be so chicken shit of me if I can't even go and watch an account and experience that, compared to all the sacrifices that people made that day to save others and so on and so forth. And they've got recordings of 911 calls and police chatter back and forth.
Yeah.
There's even a section that is deliberately off the walking path, and they say it's a trigger warning, and I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. But they actually have footage of the jumpers. These people they were cut off. There was no stairwell access anymore, and they just chose to jump. And they had notes that they had left for their families.
Oh my God.
And just so when we say like 9/11, never forget. If you ever go to that place, you can't. It's incredible just how personal and how reverent the experience of being there is.
I actually know when I'm going. I bought tickets to a concert at Radio City Music Hall this morning, and my family and I have been talking about taking a trip to New York City for years because they've never been. So I will be doing that. So that's one of the first things. One of the first things that's first thing on my list. 100% the first thing. Weird question, because I know I'm going to be this guy if nobody else is. Are there a lot of tears in that place?
Oh yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So all right. So I'm not going to be like weird crying guy.
No, it's like a tomb in there. I mean, there's noise from the exhibits, but even that they direct it in such a way that it stays pretty quiet and targeted, unless you want to hear whatever the display is. But otherwise, yeah, it's so solemn in there, and it should be.
Do you have interest in seeing that, Spencer, or is it an experience that it's too powerful for you, or where do you stand on things like that?
I'm in two minds for it, because I do remember as a child being in Israel with my parents and going to the Holocaust Museum. And
oh, geez, yeah.
I'm not comparing. I don't want anybody to say that I'm comparing the Holocaust to 9/11, two separate things. But I did go to the Holocaust Museum in Tel Aviv, which was supposed to be one of the greatest at the time. I heard the DC was incredible, but I'll never step foot into it. But I do remember a quarter of the way in, at age 13, in hysteric crying, and having my parents taking me out of the museum. Just because it was so emotionally and I want to preface again, I am not in any capacity comparing the Holocaust to 9/11. I'm just saying that going to a museum of that sort of magnitude, I don't know if I have the stomach, out of sheer being upset about the scenario, to be able to even walk in. I think that I'll be able to do the outskirts, or maybe take the steps down, a little bit, like AJ was talking about. But I don't know if I'll be able to do the full Monty, just because it was, once again, literally in my backyard and too close to cover. I mean, I was talking about earlier on with the marathon with my wife, and my wife still has PTSD to this day, which understandably so. For 5 years after the marathon bombing, she could not go back to the line by the Prudential Center in Boston. She could not go there. She couldn't stomach it. She would have me. We would drive to Cambridge, go up to Harvard Yard, or Harvard Yard, as we call it over here.
Nice.
She'd have me go an alternate route or the long way around, so I wouldn't have to pass it. It was during. We were seeing John Williams at the Boston Symphony Orchestra, which is a 15-minute walk from the line. My wife actually said to me, while they were playing the Imperial March, after here, can we make the walk? I'm like,
Wow.
yes. And she faced her fears, from there. And once again, power John Williams music and the Imperial March, because kudos to the host has to come back to Star Wars with us here on the Virtual Cantina Network.
Yeah. Right.
No cheap plug is showing here, but
Of course.
it's more important now than ever, as JT was saying, is to remember where we were, remember who we were at that time, remember who we are because of situations like this and how it shaped our lives, our children's lives, and society afterwards. And also remember how lucky we are, because a lot of people were not as lucky as they were then.
Yeah.
And remember, when we go to celebration, when we're going through security, and we have to do our real IDs now, which are, basically law at this point, just to go through to security to go to security. It all happened from there. I remember when I would fly when I was 5 years old across the country to go see my grandparents by myself. My parents would walk me to the gate, and my grandparents would be at the gate waiting for me. I remember being on a company minor on a plane. Those sort of things don't happen anymore, and this is all from 9/11. So if you're going to any of the cons in the country, if we're getting ready for celebration whenever it's the United States, or if you're going to Japan, remember the fact that a lot of these protocols that are going on right now are because of this. And remember how lucky we are to have each other and have opportunities to voice our opinion, good, bad, or indifferent. We talk about the soapbox mafia all the time, good, bad, or indifferent. We are all the same when it comes down to it. And if you really want to come down to it and tie this all back together, Star Wars can be as divisive as politics. We all know this. But our love of Star Wars as a whole, as a concept, as a feeling and a love is what brings us all together and what brings us all to celebration, regardless of where you come from. So regardless of where you come from and how you feel, every American on September the 12th was proud to be an American, proud to put up a flag. Because you never saw so many flags except for Memorial Day or the 4th of July.
Yeah, true.
And it was up for a very long time. I am very proud to be an American. I'm very proud of where we come from. I'm very proud of where we are, and I'm very proud of where we're going. And I'm very proud that we have a society right now that we can talk about our emotions, and it is okay to not be okay, but being okay with not being okay. Because I can tell you back before that time when we were growing up, it would have been frowned upon for JT to be on camera right now crying.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's
oddly enough. Yeah.
We are in a time right now where it is okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be an emotional wreck and to get it out and have a group of people with a common love. And it doesn't have to be Star Wars. It could be the United States. It could be any other franchise out there. It could be a sports team, even as delusional as those people who watch the Browns.
Gonna get dumped off the show.
I'm I'm hovering on that button,
I
man.
know. I had that a lot of time. It's heavy stuff here. We're doing some serious heavy shit here. But I wanted to make people laugh. I wanted to make you guys laugh.
Talk
So
about
trying
too
to-
soon. Jeez.
I know. But the fact is that we have each other. And we can all talk about our connections to these great tragedies. We can also look at, from these tragedies, where we have come up and how we have grown as a human race, good, bad, or indifferent, in various directions. But always remember, where were you on 9/11?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's rough, man. Yeah, I don't know how to follow that up, but except for to say that, I really want to see. I think for all the reasons that you say, Spencer, like I think that's why I want to go through the memorial. I mean, the historian in me, or history buff, I should say. I can't say historian, but for that reason, I want to see it. But I think, like AJ said, it's there's a reverence there, and I think, as emotional as I will get, I feel like it's kind of like my duty as an American to go through and show respect, there, and make it through everything. And
Good on you, mate, if you're able to.
I will say that they do put a positive spin on it. It's not just the history of that day, it's the history of that site. So it follows on from 2001 and through all the rebuilding efforts and the tributes and how the memorial came to be on that site. So you see it, that part is inspiring, as you see obviously everything that led up to the events of the day. Spencer, to your point, they have footage of airport security and the terrorists passing through. It might as well be a card table. I mean, there's like nothing to it. It's amazing that this didn't happen soon. But then once you get through the heavy part in the day itself, then it talks about the recovery efforts afterwards, which in some ways is a lot harder, obviously, because eventually it stops being a search for survivors and just clearing out the bodies. But then it talks about how the the site was rechristened as a memorial and a green space, and how it came back and life moves on, and like the fact that we're still here and we're talking about it rather than living through the sort of world that the terrorists who perpetrated this attack would have us live in instead. So it is not uplifting, but at least inspirational in the way the experience finishes itself up. So at least when you leave, you're not still sitting in the filth of that day, the emotional weight of it all. And you actually get reminded that, hey, you're here now. Things are better. It's a tragedy we'll never forget, but life does move on and we can recover.
Yeah. I mean, Mark Truax, he said earlier in the show that he was a firefighter down there. And he said, I've never been able to bring myself to go back to ground zero. I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what you had to go through back then, man. But I don't know whether to say thank you or I'm sorry or both or which, but I guess honestly it's both. So that's brutal. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, it's I'm excited to go there just because I feel like it sounds stupid to say, but it kind of feels like part of my duty as an American. I feel like if I'm in New York City, I figure that's something I should be going to see, something I should be experiencing, and especially with my family, it's something, Spencer, to your point, a few minutes ago, my stepson on a class trip went to Washington, D.C., and he did go to the Holocaust Museum. And he said that of all the things that he saw and the Smithsonian and all this other stuff, he said that the Holocaust Museum was by far the most powerful and just incredibly. I don't really, I mean, the only word to use is powerful, because,
Right.
he said they've got the pile of shoes and stuff like that. And, and again, like just something of that magnitude. So, you were saying earlier, like, you're not trying to compare the Holocaust to 9/11, and nobody, I know nobody thought that, but I think, but I don't think they're too far apart because it's such an enormous human tragedy. Obviously, the Holocaust is on a whole different level. You're talking about 6 million people as opposed to 3,000, but the sentiment is there as being something that should never have happened. Something that was just born of hate and just really disgusting. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. AJ, like you said, you hadn't been back since 2003, so now it'll be next year. What is it, 25? So it'll be 22 years since I've been there, and yeah, it's just that's just unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Chastity, we should bring dogs into it since I'm a dog person. She says, AJ, you mentioning them stopping looking for survivors makes me think of the rescue dogs that were getting depressed not finding any survivors, so workers had to pretend to be rescued for the dogs. Yeah, I remember reading that. Yeah, that was.
Did you read that book, by the way, that I got you?
I have not yet.
Yeah, I for the viewers out there, they have a gift shop, of course, and there's a whole book of impressionist art and stories about the rescue dogs of 9/11. So
I started crying. So
yeah,
it got me right away, man.
This is why they can't watch the Hallmark Channel at his house.
Exactly. So Mark says, I just want to thank the three of you for doing this show and remembering all my friends. You're welcome, man. I think as we've said, it's definitely a day that should never ever be forgotten again. I am very, very fervent in my belief that this should be a national holiday. I mean, holiday is a terrible word to use, but I really think that it should be, a day of remembrance and a day of reverence, and just given more attention than it is. I really firmly believe that. I think it's, like, as we know, it's the single worst, terrorist attack on U.S. soil in history. And I think, the loss of innocent life should always be, remembered, and it should be. I don't want to get all emotional again, but yeah, I just firmly believe that it should, it should definitely be remembered.
John, I'll give you a topic. Duran Duran. Just need a Duran or Duran.
Yeah, right. What was the other one? The Civil War was neither civil nor a war. Discuss. Yeah. But yeah, Mark, you're welcome. Like I say, it was interesting. Like when I thought about this a few weeks ago, AJ and I were like, what are we going to do as a topic? And I was like, you know what? I'm very passionate about 9/11. And I always say, it needs to have more attention, more, I hate to keep using the word, reverence. Mm-hmm. And I thought, we've got a platform where a few people watch here and there. I would like to put my money where my mouth is. It's just, it's incredible. So,
and frankly, it just didn't feel right to even try to not do a show about it. Like, we're trying to pick a topic and thinking in the back of our minds, how can we talk about anything else?
Yeah.
That would seem disrespectful to not pause and use this platform to let people think about it, reflect on it, and process it some more. I feel like we still have to process it every year.
Yeah. And I had a hard time concentrating at work all day because to be completely honest, if, this day didn't fall during our busiest time of the year at work, where I cannot take time off of work, I'm not able to, I would have this, I wouldn't be working on this day every single year. I wouldn't be. I would just be doing, watching programs about it and, things about the Freedom Tower and all that kind of stuff, just to just to show it the proper respect I think it deserves.
How about this?
You know,
My best friend from high school. Today's his birthday.
well, you know what, Spencer? It's funny you say that because AJ and our brother and I always joke, because AJ and I have an older brother. We're the three siblings in the family. And we always joke that, unfortunately, we know when the next terrorist attack on U.S. soil is going to be. And we don't know the year, but we know it's going to be May 3rd of one of these years, because that's AJ's birthday. The first terrorist attack was on February 26th, which is my birthday. And then the second one was September 11th, which is our older brother's birthday. So the only one of the three of us left is AJ. So like you said, you had two attacks in your backyard, Spencer. You and AJ just need to stay as far away from each other as possible if there's ever any like international tensions or something, because you guys are going to set off a war.
Yeah, but guess what? We'll all come back together on May the 4th.
See, there you go. There you go.
That's the way to bring it around.
I know, that's awesome. All right. Well, Spencer, do you have anything else before we put you back in the green room and close up shop here?
No, but guys, thank you so much for having me on tonight. When you mentioned this subject, I wanted to come on and talk about, like I said, being in the area when that happened. Everybody, thank you so much for watching this episode. It's unusual than our usual lighthearted shtick that we're known for. Want to also plug that tomorrow night on the Virtual Cantina Watch Along, we are going off format and we're doing a tribute to the man himself, James Earl Jones.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that. Yep.
The last of the 4 original Vaders to pass, if you think about that, between David Prowse, Bob Anderson, and Sebastian Shaw. James Earl Jones is the last one, the original 4. So tomorrow night we are going to be watching Empire Strikes Back, which we felt was the
Very cool
Star Wars episode to watch, being the one that was the most diverse and prolific, thanks to the one line, and we all know what we're talking about.
Yep.
Later on in the year, when we do the movies that we are thankful for in November, we do have a plan to watch Field of Dreams. So join us tomorrow night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific on the Virtual Cantina Network, where we are going to be watching Empire Strikes Back. Then also don't forget that in 3 weeks, we have the final Bunta E special edition coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, as part of ICC Con. Very excited about that. Karaoke and a couple of extra signers that we're bringing to the con. If you're in Nashville or able to come to Nashville, hope to see you there. It's going to be a great time, an incredible original trilogy lineup. Same weekend, we're also running a meetup over at LA Comic-Con. And then obviously we have one for New York Comic-Con and our last big one at Rhode Island this year. So there's plenty of time there. There's plenty of programming on the Virtual Cantina Network. Stay tuned for more news desks as more information comes out about Japan 2025. We will be having a Not So Virtual Cantina there. And very excited about that. But once again, guys, thank you so much for having me on the show tonight. It was a pleasure, as always, talking to you. Something outside of Star Wars, but always bring it back to Star Wars, which is why we're all here. And like I said before, it doesn't matter where your entry point is to Star Wars. You don't have to like everything. You can love what you love. Just remember, at the end of the day, we all love Star Wars for whatever it is, and now no one fan is any more of a fan than the person sitting next to you.
Mhm.
Totally agree, man. Awesome.
Well
sentiment.
said.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Much love.
Yep. We'll see you in a minute, man.
Thanks, Spencer.
So there he goes. There goes our very good friend Spencer Jowitz of the Virtual Cantina Network. Again, we've got to shout him out as being the guy that got us onto the Virtual Cantina Network. Very surprising invite when he asked us, "Hey, do you want to be on the network?" I was like, "What? Our dumbass is doing that?"
Right.
But yeah,
It's a Hedberg joke. If you want to talk to me after the show, I'll be fucking surprised.
Right. But yeah, and guys, to all you guys watching, any of you guys catching a replay or listening to the audio version, thank you for tuning in. Again, thank you, excuse me, for going a little off script and not doing, as Spencer said, our usual shtick. But again, I think that this was something that needed to be talked about. I definitely enjoy speaking about it and keeping the memory of all those people alive, all the first responders. And it also, again, as I mentioned earlier, kind of gives me hope, that, as divided as things can be, that it doesn't have to be that way. And that, somewhere deep down, all of us are still, you know, one people. And, so I'm just glad we got to do this, man. This is very, very cathartic for me, I think. And, so thanks for going along with it, AJ. I know I didn't have to twist your arm very hard, but still.
Nope. Mm-mm. As much as we love our Star Wars and everything else, there are more important things going on sometimes.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, with that, we will close up shop. Got to say thanks to everybody in the chat. Our good friends, Kale McLeish and Chastity Crawley. Mark Truax, always good to see you, man. Wish we got to see you guys more often than just celebrations. Maybe we'll have to road trip for something one of these times. Catch everybody.
Mm-hmm.
John Phillips, good to see you. Jackal One, Miranda, thank you very much. Nick Hall, all you guys, man. Again, you guys make the show go. You guys in the chat. So, we are going to be back here on Wednesday, September 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Chastity, this one's for you. We are going to be talking Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So we are doing the second of the Harry Potter novels / films. I actually just finished that one today again. I finished rereading the book. I tend to just, as soon as I get through Deathly Hallows, I tend to just go right back through. So so that's kind of cool. I'm actually buying physical copies, like I said on the last episode. So also, as AJ pointed out to me, thank you very much, it also happens to be September, which is Back to Hogwarts month. So it's another good reason for us to talk a little bit more Harry Potter with you guys. So yeah. Jackal One,
about one of my favorite characters, Gilderoy Lockhart. So
oh god, yeah,
getting on.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about this a little bit another time when it's appropriate. But Kale says breaking news: Disney being sued for Tarkin in Rogue One. Yeah, let's see. Apparently so. Yeah.
Yep.
Legal battle over using Peter Cushing's likeness. Why is this just now coming out? 8 years ago. What the hell? Oh, I hate when people do that crap. And you know what, though? It's a little personal to me today because I had to go file a small claims court claim against somebody today. So I'm not happy about having to potentially screw somebody over. But yeah. So, all right, man. Well, before we jump out, what else do you have?
Nothing. I just want to thank everybody for hanging out for us on a very different kind of show tonight. It's good to know that you guys show up for all the topics and not just the fun ones.
Yes,
we're all human
totally
beings.
agree.
We all got some stuff to unpack from time to time. So thank you very much for sticking with us and hanging tight. I'm not even going to bother with our usual social plugs or anything.
Yeah.
We'll get to it again next time.
Yep. Yeah. So like we said, man, we'll be back here on September 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time talking about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Guys, as usual, we are brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/NHC for your 30-day trial and a free audiobook download. And if you would like to get a free audiobook, there is a ton of really good 9/11 stuff on there. If you want to shoot us an email at nerfherdercouncil@gmail.com. I do have some suggestions. None of it is conspiracy theory stuff. It's all factual and some very uplifting stories and things like that. So if you'd like some suggestions, you can just hit us up on via email or on Facebook or all that good stuff. If you'd like to get some customizable Nerfherder Council swag, just go to shop.nerfherdercouncil.com. If you would like to get some awesome virtual Cantina Network swag, just go to tpublic.com/user/virtual Cantina. And again, if you are watching on YouTube, click the like button, click the subscribe button, and click the notification bell so that you are notified every time we go live. So until the next time, guys, I am your host, JT. He is AJ. And how are we going to do this now that we're not doing like the Twitter handle thing? Because I don't use Twitter anymore.
Oh, I still do from time to time. I'm at Drake Adams 579, and you can always reach the show at NHC Podcast.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So usually I do my other show and I'm just like, I'm your host, John. He is Brian, and we'll see you next time. Like, I can't do that on this show. So yeah, I'm JT. He's AJ at Drake Adams 579. So Kale wants to know our Instagram handle. We would have to create one first. So in order to have one. So there, yeah, exactly. Kale, carpe diem. So all right, guys, and not to be a cheese ass one last time, but seriously, never forget. God bless all of the victims. God bless the first responders. God bless the families. And most of all, guys, God bless you and God bless the United States of America. So we'll see you later, guys.